In the quiet of the evening, as shadows deepened outside the windows, she appeared in the bedroom doorway, like a vision from another world. She wore a dress he'd never seen her wear in this house, a deep burgundy shade, daring and enticing. The dress featured a daringly high slit, and high heels, long forgotten in the back of her closet, added a touch of defiant elegance to her look. His gaze involuntarily lifted from the flickering TV screen, but words caught in his throat. A heavy, oppressive silence became his last refuge, a silent bastion shielding a storm of unspoken questions. In the hallway, before the mirror, she adjusted her earrings, as if he were merely a ghost in this room, in this house, in her life. A sly smirk touched the corners of her lips, and her words cut through the air like an icy blade. "I'm going on a date. Try not to be too jealous." No arguments, no explanations, just that phrase, tossed out with contemptuous ease. She turned to grab her keys, and the clinking of ice in her glass echoed in the silent room, like a mocking laugh. He didn't ask where she was going, or who her companion was. He didn't even flinch, though everything inside him constricted with pain. He just watched her leave. He always watched. And in that gaze, there was something more than mere interest, a premonition of an inevitable end in that fateful moment, as the door silently closed behind her. He slowly rose to his feet, feeling the burden of years inexplicably magnified tenfold in mere seconds. Overcoming a sudden wave of weakness, he made his way to the kitchen, where, with hands trembling from agitation, he retrieved the cherished bottle of wine she'd been saving for special occasions, what bitter irony, and sank into a chair. However, he didn't intend to drown his sorrow in wine. His aim was to sink into agonizing contemplation. She had forgotten her phone charger, but didn't fail to grab a bottle of her favorite perfume. There wasn't a shadow of doubt, not the slightest hesitation in her actions. He opened his laptop, and his uncooperative fingers, trembling over the keys, typed a single word: betrayal. He didn't have to search long for answers. No sooner had he begun this painful search than he inadvertently witnessed a notification not meant for his eyes. Her tablet had automatically synchronized with the cloud storage. Photos. Dozens of incriminating photos. There were no faces, just fragments of naked bodies, entwined in passionate embraces, wrinkled sheets from unfamiliar hotel rooms, foreign and cold, bold selfies in a mirror, where someone else's shadow ominously lurked in the corner. His breath caught, not a single gasp. The air in his lungs turned to scorching ice, and his heart constricted to the size of a tiny pebble. Audio recordings followed, each more insulting than the last. He started the third file. First there was static, an indistinct whisper, and then laughter. It was her laugh, followed by a voice all too familiar to him. He still has no idea, and why should he know? He thinks I'm at a book club meeting. Poor guy, he's probably doing laundry while we're having fun. She burst into laughter again, and in that moment, it was as if something in his soul broke, not shattered into pieces, not exploded, but bent under such a weight that it would never straighten again. He didn't shed a single tear, didn't make a sound. He did something far more terrifying. He started making plans. He opened her personal drawer and took out a diary whose existence she was unaware of. Page 16, a date marked with hearts, next Friday. The hotel name, the meeting time. He took screenshots of everything. He printed them, collected all the evidence, even bookmarking pages, and then, for the first time in their entire relationship, He called her mother. Just wanted to confirm about the family dinner next Friday. Will everyone be there? The terse reply was, yes. Excellent, he thought. That brief exchange bought him a full week, 7 days to transform himself into the man she could never even imagine. And when the bitter truth came out, it wouldn't just be a blow, but a true tragedy. A complete collapse. The next morning, she acted as if nothing extraordinary had happened, as if there hadn't been that fateful dress, that sinister smirk, as if her 9 words hadn't shattered something vital inside him. She serenely poured coffee, humming a quiet tune, and asked if he'd seen her favorite scarf. He curtly replied, no, continuing to silently observe her every move. Now, everything seemed meticulously staged, as if he were watching a stranger skillfully portraying his wife. She sat across from him at the table, her bare feet barely touching the floor, absorbed in scrolling through her phone's news feed, smiling mysteriously at messages clearly not meant for him. But the most horrifying thing wasn't the betrayal itself, but the ease with which she did it, how effortlessly she slipped into this double life, as if she wore it like a second skin. He, too, tried to stay in character, playing his part in the charade. He even kissed her cheek before leaving for work. But as soon as the front door closed behind him, he didn't head to the office at all. He drove straight to a print shop, where he handed over a flash drive with the prepared files. The man behind the counter meticulously examined the contents, blinked in surprise, and asked doubtfully, "Are you sure you want to print this?" Front and back covers, neatly bound inserts separating conversation fragments, and a glossy cover. He silently nodded, unwilling to elaborate. This was the first day of his meticulously planned revenge. By the end of the 3rd day of meticulous work, all joint financial assets had been transferred to a specially opened temporary account. All actions were carried out in strict accordance with the law and without undue publicity. He had previously consulted a financial advisor, recommended by a mutual friend. This person, who himself had gone through a painful divorce, specialized in assisting those facing the risk of losing assets due to emotional distress. There wasn't a trace of malice in his heart, at least at this stage. Only the cold composure and calculated precision of a surgeon performing a complex operation. That same evening, his wife returned home late again. When asked about her book club meeting, she replied enthusiastically, "The discussion was simply incredible. Too bad you weren't there." After these words, she gave him a kiss. And in that moment, for the first time in years of marriage, he felt absolutely nothing. Not the slightest spark, no warmth, just an overwhelming numbness. He watched her undress without a hint of shame, put on her pajamas, and slip under the covers, as if he was still a part of her life. Suddenly, she reached for her phone, and his gaze involuntarily fell on the screen. In the corner, a name glowed. Tucker. Tucker had been at their wedding ceremony. Tucker had given a touching toast, proclaiming their union forever. Tucker had once cried his eyes out on their couch, going through his own divorce. Back then, he had handed him a mug of beer and offered words of support, assuring him that not all marriages ended sadly, and urging him to hold on. And now, that same Tucker was holding on in his own bed. What bitter irony! Yet, strangely, his anger wasn't directed at Tucker, contrary to what anyone might expect. He was angry at himself for not seeing the truth sooner, for allowing kindness and trust to blind him. He had believed that respect was a feeling that couldn't be faked for so long. But, as it turned out, his wife was a true master of deception. On the 5th day of his journey, he found himself in front of the very hotel he had so often seen in the photos. With the confidence of a man who knew his place, he entered the luxurious lobby and asked the clerk to confirm a reservation. He stated her name, and the clerk, lost in thought, automatically nodded, giving him the time and suite number. Leaving a generous tip in gratitude, he headed back to the print shop. This time, he ordered 2 additional copies, one for him, one for her. Each copy was perfectly bound, crisp and undeniable. Like a verdict, he had no intention of making a scene or succumbing to anger. That was completely out of character for him. He was not a man who raised his voice. On the contrary, he was one who remembered everything, meticulously recorded it, and preferred to show rather than tell. It was then that a plan matured in his mind, the last but most impactful message before the inevitable collapse. The night before their planned getaway, he discreetly entered their luxurious suite. No breaking in was necessary. He had foresightedly booked the adjacent room and slid an envelope under the door. The envelope simply read, "You are both invited, RSVP not required." Inside, they would find photos, transcripts of conversations, and a printed guest list for the upcoming family dinner organized by her family the following evening. That same evening, she planned to betray him, entangled in hotel sheets with someone he once considered his friend. On the last page, only one line was printed. "Smile for the camera. Room 406 offers a perfect view." She still had no idea he had witnessed everything, but tomorrow she would learn that her audience was not just him, but the world. The next morning, she showed uncharacteristic tenderness. She brought him coffee in bed, gently touched her forehead to his, and draped his old hoodie, which she used to call cozy ugly, over him. Without knowing the truth, one might have thought her feelings had reignited with new fervor. But he was aware of her plans, and now understood the motives behind her behavior. She was trying to quell any pangs of guilt, if they even existed. She needed the illusion of emotional warmth before dissolving into another man's arms that very night. He donned his usual mask once more. He responded with laughter, complimented her hairstyle, and spoke of her delightful scent. When she asked if he would mind if she let loose that evening, he nodded with the same condescending smile one might give a child clumsily hiding a pre-dinner dessert. Around 6:30, she left the house in that same burgundy dress. He watched her from the window, unseen. She never once looked back. At 6:55 p.m., he pulled into the parking lot of Cranell's Steakhouse, where her parents were already waiting with her 2 sisters and their husbands. This dinner had been planned weeks ago, one of those obligatory family gatherings no one was happy about, but couldn't avoid. They were clearly surprised to see him alone. Her mother even asked in a half-joking tone, "Did Nain get stuck on her makeup again?" He smiled back. "Something like that." He took his seat, greeted everyone warmly, kept up polite conversation, and even raised a toast to everyone's health, citing too much time spent driving lately. Then, 10 minutes into the meal, he took several brown envelopes from his bag and placed one in front of her mother. She looked at it with confusion. "What's this?" "A mistake," he replied, "but not mine." He distributed the remaining envelopes, one to each family member, and asked them not to open them yet. Nain's father, always suspicious, narrowed his eyes. "Curtis, what's going on?" He looked him straight in the eye. "Everything in these envelopes contains timestamps, backups, and audio recordings. You don't have to read it right now. In fact, I'd prefer you wait until she arrives." "She's coming here?" her younger sister asked. He nodded affirmatively. "Oh, yes. Any minute now." He didn't reveal that she still believed she was heading to a luxurious suite with Tucker. He omitted mentioning the note attached to the hotel room door. "Dinner date rescheduled. Dress code enforced." At 7:26 p.m., just as her mother was about to ask another question, the restaurant doors swung open. She appeared, with meticulously curled hair, clacking heels, and a self-satisfied smirk, as if nothing had happened. However, upon seeing him, her face instantly changed. Then she noticed her family and the envelopes on the table. Confusion stopped her. Her gaze darted between the table, his bag, her family's faces, and him. "Sit down," he said in a calm, unaccusing tone. She froze. Her mother was the first to break the silence. "Nain, what is going on here?" He could see the gears in her mind frantically turning. She was assessing the situation, trying to decide whether to lie, pretend to be upset, faint, beg for forgiveness, or simply flee. But instead, she let out a chuckle. A sharp, unpleasant sound, more suited to a courtroom than a cozy restaurant. "Oh my God," she said with a strained smile. "Did you all actually believe this?" Silence was the only reply. He leaned forward. "You can say it's fake. You can claim I'm just jealous. You can even assert that I fabricated the recording. But once they read the contents of these envelopes, you won't be able to show your face in this restaurant again without causing whispers behind your back." Her eyes narrowed. He placed another, smaller, cream-colored envelope, sealed with gold foil, on the table. "What's that?" she asked. He remained silent. Her father answered. "It's yours." She slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a sheet of paper with a printed image, a freeze frame from the hotel's surveillance camera. The picture showed her and Tucker embracing near the elevator at 3:47 a.m. The expression on her face upon seeing this photo spoke not of anger, but of panic. Then he whispered words she never expected to hear. "Smile wider. The internet isn't impressed yet." The envelope fell from her hands, but he didn't stop, because it wasn't about the hotel, or the friend, or the dress. It was about the impunity she had felt for so long, and this wasn't even the main surprise. In the suspended silence, an unspoken question hung in the air. Nain, as if petrified, clutched her purse, as though it held the possibility of dissolving into oblivion. Her mother, sifting through the papers in the envelope, with each page, lost more color from her face. Her father, pushing back his chair, massaged his temples as if sensing an imminent catastrophe. Her younger sister, with eyes wide in astonishment, whispered a question full of hope and despair. "How long have you known?" His reply was, "Long enough to doubt my own sanity, and long enough to understand the problem wasn't me." Suddenly, Nain broke the silence. With deliberate nonchalance, she pulled up a chair and sat at the table, as if nothing could mar this family dinner. "This is simply ridiculous," she muttered, trying to preserve what little dignity she had left. "If you were even an ounce like Tucker." Her voice wavered, but she didn't finish. His quiet, yet firm challenge cut through the air. "Repeat his name, dare you." Nain's lips thinned, but the room's equilibrium was broken. In a unified surge, everyone began speaking, asking questions, gasping at what they read, trying to reconcile the image of the woman they knew with what appeared before them on the pages. At that very moment, he pulled his smartphone from his pocket and activated the playback of a pre-prepared video recording. Countless hours had been spent on meticulous work, collecting disparate data, synchronizing numerous devices, extracting information from archived backups. She had naively believed he wasn't tech-savvy enough to navigate the intricacies of digital evidence. However, all the necessary evidence was present: text messages, voice messages, even internet search history. But the recording he was about to demonstrate surpassed all her darkest expectations, as it didn't come from her. The voice belonged to Tucker, apparently in a state of severe intoxication, perhaps shortly after she rejected him. He had left a 2-minute voice message on her outdated tablet. Instead of declarations of fervent love or sincere apologies, a torrent of venomous curses, malicious accusations, and terrifying revelations poured from his mouth. He cynically mused about how easy it had been to manipulate her, about her insatiable need for drama, comparing her to a chaotic mess skillfully disguised with plausible excuses. Tucker declared that her husband had been surprisingly easy prey, and that this entire affair began as an innocent bet between him and his friend, who could penetrate her mind faster, not her heart. The moment the recording began, the atmosphere in the restaurant seemed to freeze. The silence was broken only by the quiet clink of a fork, accidentally dropped onto a nearby table. Nain's mother let out a muffled gasp, and her sister couldn't suppress an angry curse. Nain herself seemed struck by the revelation, as if she had encountered a ghost from the past. "I never—" She began to justify herself. "No," his voice interrupted her. "What bothers you isn't the fact itself, but that I managed to discover it." After these words, he extended a small envelope containing a business card across the table. "Independent digital forensics expert. All materials have been verified and are time-stamped. No fakes," he explained. "Want to know how deep this goes? Examine the deleted files or the recovery bin on her tablet, whose existence she preferred to forget. Or perhaps her location tracking app. You'll see that her hotel visits perfectly align with the timings." Nain tried to stand, but her father, barely containing his rage, ordered her to sit. It was a tone she had never heard before. She froze, torn between the urge to flee and the need to stay. Her face flushed, her gaze darting between her family, him, and the table strewn with irrefutable evidence. Then he stood himself. "You know what the funniest thing is," he said, tucking his phone into his coat pocket. "This dinner is merely a prelude, not the finale." Nain looked confused and frightened. "I have no intention of suing, fighting over the dog, or begging for answers. I already have everything I need." He turned to her parents. "You raised a person who lies better than she breathes." Then he looked at Nain again, but there was neither hatred nor sadness in his gaze, just clarity. "But she's about to lose something she didn't even realize she still had." He left the restaurant without waiting for anyone's words, knowing that the next act of this drama would unfold not at the dinner table. It was waiting in her inbox, in the form of a link to a private video she didn't remember recording, because, in fact, she hadn't that fateful night. No sign came from her, no question about his motives, no doubt about the seriousness of his intentions, only an all-encompassing silence, as if she had dissolved into oblivion. And this silence was necessary, for the video he sent her was by no means a trivial deception, a cheap trick, or a random surveillance camera recording. No, it carried a far more intimate nature. The footage had been captured 4 months prior, during the era of her hypocritical love, when the lies were so artful they made him doubt his own intuition. The video was hidden deep within a smart home device, whose secret storage she was completely unaware of. The purchase of a used indoor security camera was intended to monitor their beloved pet when they were away. The small, inconspicuous device was disguised in the corner of the living room bookshelf, behind volumes of novels she never bothered to read. Initially, there was no malicious intent to spy on her. However, one day, while remotely configuring the camera, his gaze accidentally fell upon the archive. In that moment, the truth was revealed. It was a regular weekday, nearing noon. He was supposed to be at the office due to work, but having forgotten his phone charger, he returned home without warning. It was then that he inadvertently witnessed the scene unfolding on screen. She, dressed in a robe, animatedly talking on the phone, bursting into laughter, and then Tucker appeared at the doorstep. She opened the door before he even had a chance to knock. The scene unfolding before his eyes left an indelible mark on his mind. Not only the visual images, but her every word, every gesture, the dismissive smirk with which she offered a drink to another. Her words, full of condescension, as she called him sweet, but naive. She confessed that his presence in her life was due to his undemanding nature and predictability, the fact that he was a safe harbor for her. Tucker burst into laughter, sarcastically noting that in his imagination she was probably doing housework while he toiled. In that moment, she glanced directly into the lens of the hidden camera, unaware of its existence, and uttered a phrase full of irony. "He thinks I'm his wife." This, in her opinion, was the height of comedy. He didn't utter a single word about what he had seen. Not on that fateful day, nor throughout the following week. He was merely a silent witness to the unfolding drama of betrayal, from beginning to end, without pauses, without hesitation, depriving her of any opportunity to distort the truth. And now, the irrefutable evidence of her infidelity awaited her in her inbox, an unedited, uncut video titled, "You Said This About Me." She had no way to delete it. That function had been foresightedly blocked. She couldn't forward it without exposing herself. And most importantly, she couldn't find a rational explanation for what was happening, neither regarding the recording time, nor the camera angle, nor the tone of her voice. The next morning, the phone rang. He deliberately gave her a chance to speak. Shortly after, a message arrived, full of pleas. "We need to talk urgently." That video was presented in a distorted light, taken out of context. This excuse, this cliché of taken out of context, was the final straw that broke his patience. It was as if years of minor grievances and humiliations suddenly crashed down on him with their full weight. In response, he sent only 2 words: "Check Dropbox." In the Dropbox cloud storage, folders awaited her, like pages of an incriminating dossier. All correspondence was collected there, every message she had ever sent to Tucker, which he had secretly accessed. Voice messages, phone screen recordings, GPS data tracking her car parked near his house, even a copy of a doctor's bill she had so diligently tried to conceal, a prescription written under her maiden name. And at the very bottom of this abyss of deceit, another video, this time, he himself was on screen. He had recorded this video the night after that fateful family dinner, sitting in the empty bedroom in front of the mirror, where she used to primp for her rendezvous. There was no yelling, no hysteria in his voice. He simply looked directly into the camera and said, "If you're watching this, it means you've finally realized the extent of your betrayal, or, at the very least, you have no more ways to hide the truth. You turned our marriage into a farce, a public spectacle. Well, here's my final act. I won't sue. I won't fight for property. I'm leaving the keys, the car, and the silence. You can take everything you took from me, because I've already taken back what's most valuable, myself." That was all. No grand pronouncements, no threats, just the bare truth. Like a verdict, 2 hours later, a call came from her sister, whose voice seethed with rage. The rage, however, was directed not at Curtis, but at Nain herself. Her sister reported that she had discovered recordings, messages, and files whose contents literally made her sick. "Curtis, I don't understand how you managed to keep your sanity through all of this," she said. Curtis didn't reply, because the truth was, he hadn't entirely preserved it. Something had broken inside him. Long before any of this became public, he had simply learned to skillfully hide it. But now, with everything revealed, he felt utterly exposed, and Nain, as if unwilling to put an end to this story, appeared at his door late that night, when everything had already collapsed. In her hand was an object Curtis never expected to see again. She stood in the doorway, as if she weren't the cause of this all-consuming fire. Her hair was carelessly swept back, no trace of makeup on her face, no jewelry, none of her usual games. Only in her hand she held something that once belonged to him, but now seemed utterly unrelated to her. It was his high school diary, which he hadn't seen in years. It lay in a box buried under old coats in the hallway. A box you forget exists until someone starts rummaging through it with a specific intent. "I found this," she said, holding the diary like a piece of evidence. And I read it. Curtis didn't move, didn't invite her in. He just stood, the door slightly ajar, and behind her, the night's darkness deepened. "I wanted to remember what you were like," she continued in a quiet voice, "before I ruined everything." Curtis almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurdly ridiculous to think this was a reasonable step after everything she had done. "Why are you here, Nain?" She lowered her gaze to the diary, opening it to a page Curtis hadn't seen in decades. "You wrote about being afraid you'd never be chosen, that everyone always wanted someone brighter, bolder, and you were just the safe option." She looked up, and something akin to an excuse was legible in her gaze. "That's why I did it, because I hated that it was true." There it was, her first attempt to shift his pain onto herself, repackaging it as her own justification. "You used my trauma as a cheat code for betrayal," Curtis said coldly. "Impressive." Nain flinched, but then she walked into the house. Curtis didn't stop her. Perhaps he wanted to see where this would lead. Perhaps a part of him needed to hear it. The last excuse, the last attempt to rewrite the narrative in her favor. She sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching the diary like a lifeless bird. "I yearned to find strength," she murmured in a muffled voice, "to feel desired by a man like him, by someone who stirred a sense of danger within me. But every time I came home, I saw your unwavering kindness, your neatly folded sweaters, and your memory of my dislike for cinnamon, and it only intensified my self-hatred." He remained still, unmoving. She looked at him again. "You were never ordinary, Curtis. You were simply a man who was authentically himself, and I didn't know how to live with that." "Then why didn't you leave?" he finally uttered. "Why didn't you just say it? Just pack your bags and go?" Her answer was immediate. "Because you would never have tried to stop me, and that would have made me feel even more worthless." There it was, cruelty artfully veiled in tender words. She longed for him to break. She wanted him to scream, to cry, to collapse, so she could convince herself she was a victim of a love that consumed her. But he never gave her that opportunity. And now, as she clearly saw the destruction she had wrought, she had no one to blame but herself. She rose from her seat and, approaching the kitchen counter, carefully placed her diary next to his keys. Her voice carried a tone of resignation. She knew there was no turning back. She emphasized that she hadn't come for forgiveness, but to reveal the truth to him. She confessed her unsuccessful attempts to change, to which he sharply retorted, accusing her of trying to avoid exposure rather than genuinely wanting to change. After these words, she slowly nodded, then pulled a USB drive from her coat pocket. A grim premonition washed over him. His questioning gaze met her tear-filled eyes. She called the flash drive insurance, but didn't specify against what. She avoided his gaze, and her voice trembled as she uttered the name, Tucker. According to her, Tucker had kept personal recordings that he threatened to make public if she ever left him. He threatened to send these materials to him, to her workplace, to her parents. She confessed in horror that some recordings were made without her knowledge. What he heard made him blanch. He stepped back from her, unable to believe Tucker could stoop so low. She confirmed his worst fears, calling it leverage. She extended the USB drive to him, hoping this act might somewhat atone for her guilt. In her eyes, a plea for forgiveness was legible, a request that he at least stop hating her. He silently took the flash drive, and she headed for the door. He watched her go, without uttering a word, and quietly closed the door behind her. Left alone, he stared at the USB drive for a long time, torn between the urge to destroy it and the need to know the truth. Curiosity finally won. He connected the flash drive to his computer, and what he saw overturned all his perceptions of Tucker. It turned out that Nain was not the only victim of his hidden recordings, and the drive's contents weren't limited to just her personal life. The enigmatic USB drive, miniature and silver-plated, bore the marks of time and careless handling. Scuffs on its casing spoke of countless hours spent in a pocket, of drops and impacts. Despite its modest size, it felt heavier in his hand than expected, as if something more than mere digital files lay hidden within, as if it were burdened with memories and experiences, an emotional weight that couldn't be measured in gigabytes. Connecting the drive to his laptop, his gaze involuntarily lingered on the list of folders. There were only 6, each succinctly labeled only with the creation date. No names, no explanations, just 6 timestamps spanning a period of 7 months. Curiosity 1, and the earliest one was opened. The folder's contents matched his grim expectations. A blurry video, evidently captured by a hidden camera, placed on a nightstand, showed Nain and Tucker. The filming angle was overtly voyeuristic. The audio quality left much to be desired, but even through the static and noise, he could recognize her voice, her infectious laugh, which was once meant only for him. After 10 seconds of viewing, he stopped the playback. Any further viewing was unbearable. This wasn't done for self-torture, but to rid himself of this nightmare. An inner voice urgently demanded immediate deletion, but something inexplicable held him back. The second folder brought an even greater shock. This time, the screen showed not Nain, but a completely unfamiliar woman. Dark-haired, young and constrained, she moved with clear nervousness. She seemed not to understand what she was doing there. The stranger looked bewildered and embarrassed. Soon, Tucker's voice emerged, calm, persuasive, manipulative. He said, "You said you needed a job. I'm trying to help you. Just relax. No one but me will see this." What he heard made his blood run cold. The third folder revealed another victim, another girl, the same setting, the same voice, but a different apartment. With slow horror, the realization of what was truly happening dawned on him. This wasn't just infidelity. Tucker was a true predator. He used the same rehearsed tactics he applied to Nain, but in a far more heinous form. He targeted vulnerable women, deprived them of support and confidence, secretly recorded them without their consent, and, judging by the frightened tones in some audio files, he likely threatened them. Deep within the fifth folder, as if in a bottomless well, something was discovered that made his breath catch for a moment. Emily appeared on the monitor screen, who had once looked after the family's pet when they were away. A young student, unfailingly polite and modest, she seemed barely acquainted with Tucker, save for fleeting encounters. However, she was now captured sitting awkwardly on the unmistakable couch. Undisguised fear was legible in her eyes, and then a voice was heard, uttering his name. Off-screen, Tucker's sinister warning to Emily echoed, "Your boss's husband. Do you think he'll believe you? Does he even know your last name?" The only response was silence and a timid nod, indicating an understanding of the futility of resistance. It was at this moment that he slammed the laptop shut. For the first time during the unfolding drama, he was overcome not by a feeling of betrayal, but by a sense of complicity. He realized that he had himself invited this man into his home, shared meals with him, laughed at his jokes, trusted him. And now he had a hard drive, brimming with evidence of Tucker's heinous acts. It became clear that Tucker had not only exploited his wife's trust, but had committed similar crimes against at least 5 other women. And possibly more. Curtis sent Nain a message, asking if she knew about the others. The reply was immediate. "What others?" In response, Curtis sent a screenshot showing a frightened Emily in the center of the frame. This time, no reply came. Unable to keep it to himself any longer, Curtis called Emily, not knowing what he would say. After the third ring, she answered. Her voice sounded wary. "Curtis?" he began. "Emily, this is going to sound crazy, but—" She interrupted him. "I know. I thought you'd find out eventually. I didn't think he'd keep it. I didn't think he'd share it." Curtis swallowed and asked why she hadn't said anything. "Because he said he'd destroy me," she replied. "He said, you wouldn't believe me. He said your wife already hated me, that if I said anything, I'd lose everything." Curtis felt sick to his stomach. After a short pause, Emily asked if Nain was okay. Curtis almost laughed and suggested she define "okay" for herself. Silence reigned, broken by Emily's unexpected words. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner. But you were such a decent person. I didn't want to drag you into it. I thought you were the only one who didn't know." Her voice wavered, and she added, "But I guess now you do." In the quiet dimness of the room, after the phone call ended, he remained alone with the flickering computer screen. The open folders with documents weighed heavily on him, as if he were submerged under water. Now, it was no longer about betrayal, but about far more serious matters of responsibility, of seeking justice, and of rectifying the consequences of others' mistakes that had, nonetheless, become his personal burden. He understood the need to act. He transferred all files to a secure drive, ensuring their safety. Then he dialed the number of someone he hadn't been in touch with for many years, his brother, an experienced criminal defense attorney. During the conversation, he clearly outlined the gravity of the situation. The matter had transcended a mere divorce and taken on a far greater scale. He reported that he had irrefutable evidence, and warned that if it failed, he wouldn't be the only one affected. After a brief pause, his brother replied, suggesting they meet immediately at his office and to remain silent until then. The next morning, the brothers met at the law firm. They didn't exchange hugs, which was uncharacteristic for them. However, his brother's gaze spoke volumes. He understood the complexity of the situation, but approved of the decision made. For 4 hours, they meticulously examined the files, video recordings, transcripts, and voice messages. The attorney, like a skilled surgeon extracting shrapnel, made notes, created backups, and asked clarifying questions. At one point, he stated that this was not merely a scandal, but a criminal offense. He gave his brother clear instructions: what to do, whom to contact, what to say, and, just as importantly, what to avoid saying. By noon, they had an action plan ready, and by evening, Tucker's name was mentioned in a sealed statement delivered by his brother to a trusted contact in law enforcement. He didn't personally go to the police, leaving the matter to the professionals he trusted. That fateful night, Nain contacted him again through digital communication. Her message was filled with desperation. "He's threatening to release everything, not just the compromising videos, but all the dirty laundry, our personal conversations, intimate entries from your diary, my revelations, uttered in a fit of rage. Curtis, he's planning something catastrophic, like a nuclear explosion." Curtis sank into deep thought, replaying all her words, actions, shattered hopes, and erased memories in his mind. In a fleeting impulse, he felt pity for her, for she had transformed from a puppet master into a puppet, becoming another victim of Tucker's manipulations. He replied succinctly, with just 2 words: "Too late." No reply came. 3 days later, a call came from his brother, bearing news. He was arrested without a fuss. This information won't leak to the press until charges are filed, but he won't escape punishment. Kurt, you stopped him. However, triumphant elation did not visit his soul. He felt no pride in what he had done. Instead, he felt a strange tranquility, as if after a destructive storm that had left only desolation in its wake. A week later, Curtis left the family home. Not out of necessity, for legally he was the rightful owner. He simply could no longer breathe air permeated with her memories. He rented a modest dwelling on the other side of town. Small, minimalist, quiet, Without shared closets or traces of her perfume in the walls, the divorce proceeded without a hitch. She made no demands. Perhaps she realized she had already taken too much. Time passed, and life gradually returned to its usual course. Morning runs resumed, bringing a sense of freedom and lightness. A new hobby emerged, pottery classes, where amazing things emerged from shapeless clay. Evenings became filled with reading, captivating novels, distracting him from the flood of emails. Sleep became deep and peaceful, free from agonizing awakenings and tormenting thoughts. And most importantly, for the first time in years, the habit of looking over his shoulder, expecting another blow to the back, disappeared. Fate brought him Camilla, a woman with kind eyes and genuine laughter. Their acquaintance happened at a bookstore, by a shelf with a dusty, forgotten novel they both admitted they'd never be able to finish. She suggested coffee, and he agreed. In their conversation, there was no room for past hurts and disappointments. They spoke of music, of their love for animals, and of how the world transforms when you manage to escape someone else's shadow. When Camilla first stepped into his apartment, she scanned the room and said with a smile, "It's so peaceful here." It was at that moment that the realization of long-awaited freedom dawned. Freedom not only from Nain and Tucker, but also from that part of himself that viewed silence as a weakness and loyalty as blind adherence, even when the truth had long since festered. That person no longer existed. In his place was someone honest, healing, and whole, and for the first time in a long time, there was no need to justify himself to anyone, because peace was finally found, and this time no one could disturb it.